Welcome, I'm Dr. Sal Pasquarello, Superintendent of Schools for Danbury, Connecticut, and welcome to Pockets of Excellence. This, as you know, is a show that we have periodically during the year to highlight some of the programming that we have here in Danbury. This past year, we were privileged to have our review of Danbury High School, and that's what our focus will be tonight, talking about the accreditation process and what that design looks like and what are the outcomes of a visit by fellow professionals. And on my panel tonight, I'll have them introduce themselves. We'll start with our principal, Dan.
Dan Donovan, principal of Danbury High School.
And Dan, how long have you been here?
This is my 4th year.
But what did you do before?
I was a principal of the Freshman Academy for 8 years. I was athletic director for 1, and then I was a level assistant principal for, I believe, 4 before that.
And Mr. Wilson?
I'm Scott Leslie, principal of Ram High School in Hebron, Connecticut, and I chair the NEASC accreditations.
And I'm Kevin Walston, assistant superintendent.
We thought we would start with, as I was talking to one of the students today, what's the purpose of tonight? The mannerism of which schools are accredited in Connecticut, well, not just Connecticut, throughout the United States. It's a self-study process that is validated by professionals with a core of standards that need to be met. That is reviewed, looked at, and then a group comes in and makes a decision if we're adhering to those standards, and then makes recommendations. And that's sort of the focus of today's conversation. We'll start with probably the most important component is the process that Dan and the faculty would. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the composition of the faculty and then the study process.
Sure. As you mentioned, the NEASC visitation is once every 10 years. So about 2 years before you're coming up, you have to start preparing for the visit. And we select our co-chairs that will actually chair the whole entire process. It's not done by administration, it's done by teachers. And we selected Dr. Obry, who's our fine arts department head, and Ms. Tracy Cook, who's a library and media specialist at Danbury High School. We went to the NEASC as a convening of everyone.
I'm sorry, NEASC, you might want to tell the what that stands for.
The New England Associations of Schools and Colleges. And they have put on, a preparation meeting for all of that. And we went to that meeting 2 years before it. From there, they give you a guideline and timelines and do a very nice job of planning out what you need to do for your upcoming visit. So from there, we selected what's called the steering committee, which runs a lot of the operations of what's going on. And underneath the steering committee, there are the 7 standards that every single staff member was assigned at least one. They were on one standard. So every staff member in our building took part in this self-study.
And how many would that be?
240.
So this process starts with a leadership group. They're trained through NEASC, and then they come onto the campus and work with their own faculty and create these 7 committees.
Yep, we create the committees. Like I said, NEASC does a nice job of putting all of the standards and all the information online for you and the booklets. So once you come back, all of the standards know exactly what they're looking for. They have nice bullet points and indicators that you have to talk to during your self-study. So once we had that set up, then it was about 1.5 years out, we started the self-study, where it requires us to get a lot of information from how many classrooms, everything from classrooms, custodians, to budgets from central office. So it takes a long time. A lot of our professional development time for the year is used writing this self-study. So we have to write the self-study, draft the self-study, and then eventually the staff votes on the self-study. Do we agree with what each standard had written? And then we give ourselves a rating. And then from there, the NEASC committee comes in, as you said, and they validate and look for the same things that we've indicated.
So after that's done, it's submitted to whom and what happens?
It's submitted right before the self-study, probably a month out, I would say. The final copy is put into their portal. It's all online. They have it. And then Scott and his team of 20 that came, I believe it was 18, team of 18 have a chance to preview that, and then when they come actually in for their 3-day visit, They already have the materials ahead of hand, and then they get to look at it and preview it. Danbury High School being such a large school, it's difficult for 18 people, even in 3 days, to grasp what's going on.
Okay, so, Scott, why don't you talk about at that point, you've received the study, what do you do with your team, and what does that team look like in its makeup and composition?
Sure. So NEASC is really the accrediting agency for all the New England states. So it includes Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. So the visiting committee, the 18 that were here at Danbury High School, consists of educators from typically around New England. In this case, I think we were all from Connecticut. You may have a visiting committee that includes Massachusetts and Rhode Island for Connecticut visits, but we're all from Connecticut. And these are teachers.
Connecticut high schools?
Yes, they're all high school, either teachers or administrators, or central office staff. And they are typically teachers or administrators that have previously participated on a visiting committee, or they have some connection to the NEASC process. They may be sharing the self-study of their own school. So there's a good reason for them to get out and see how the process works. So when I receive the list of the 18 members of my team, what I do in the weeks leading up to the self-study or to the visit is share with them quite a bit of information about how the process works, what they're expected to do while they're here, what it means to be a member of the visiting committee. They have access to the self-study, so what I'll do is I'll assign 2 of the visiting committee members to each of the 7 standards. And the 7 standards cover the core values and mission statement, curriculum, instruction, assessment, leadership in school climate, guidance, media center, special ed, and then community support for the high school. And community support typically focuses on the Board of Ed, central office, and the district funding for the school. So each team member is responsible for one of the standards, and we typically have 2 team members overseeing and working with each of the standards. So the first time that we actually come together is the Sunday of the visit. So, we're strangers until we, other than talking online and via phone, we come together. I take that Sunday morning and orient them. We go through much of the documentation that the high school had put together, and I have to say the self-study was really, really well done. It was incredibly informative. I think the high school took a brutally honest look at themselves. And so we had the advantage of knowing what are the highlights, what are those things that the school is doing exceptionally well, and what are the areas that they're looking for some assistance with. And then we take that Sunday through Wednesday, and through a process of shadowing students into classrooms, we met with pretty much every group within the district. So we met with teachers, we met with parents, we met with students, we met with central office staff, we met with board members, we met with administrators. So we took the first few days of the visit to really take a look at the self-study, ask, is this what we're seeing when we're in the classrooms, when we're talking to people? And then we take kind of the last couple of days of the visit to develop our conclusions. So each of the standards is broken down into indicators, and we'll write a conclusion focused on each of those indicators, how well we think the school is adhering to the standards, and then included with that will be a list of commendations commending those things that the school is doing particularly well, and a list of recommendations, those things that we believe the school needs to work on in order to fully adhere to the standards. So when I leave on Wednesday, I was able to report out to the faculty a brief overview of our findings, and then I take the report home and I've got to edit it to, because I've got a report written by 18 people. I need to edit it so that it's kind of one voice and make sure that there aren't any inconsistencies and that we've got it. I then took that edited report and submitted it to to NEASC a couple of weeks before the December break, and then I'm waiting now to get that report back to me. So what they'll do is they'll take a look at it. They have a professional editor that will make sure that, grammatically, punctuation is fine. They'll look at it and make suggestions. So they may see that we say one thing in one standard and we may contradict it in another. So make sure that the report flows. Once I get that back, which will be in probably a couple of weeks, I'll have a chance to do one more edit, and then I'll share that draft with Dan, and then we'll get together one more time. He'll have a chance to take a look at it and make sure that everything we've said is accurate, that we haven't missed anything. And then once that process is done, so we're probably now looking at towards the end of February, beginning of March, I'll be able to submit the final report to the district. And so the district will have the report, it'll have all the recommendations, all the commendations. That's still not the end of the process, because then the NEASC commission, the commission is made up of, I think it's 32 volunteers from all of the New England states. The commissioners meet 4 times a year, and they review these decennial reports, and they will make the final decision on the accreditation status for the school. And so likely late spring, early summer, Dan will receive a letter from NEASC highlighting the school's accreditation status, and then it'll list those commendations that they found most impressive, and then they'll have a list of when the recommendations should be completed. So there'll be a 2-year follow-up report and a 5-year follow-up report, and possibly special progress reports within that time.
So thank you for that. Question I have is, so what's the whole point of accreditation?
Great question. And I think the point of accreditation is why people like myself are so invested in the process, and I think why so many high schools see the value of it. I think we have all agreed that the standards are sound standards, that they really describe those pieces that we all feel a well-working high school has to have in place. And in order to maximize student learning, these are the types of things like school climate, good leadership, sound curriculum, sound instructional practices. And what this allows for each high school is an outside organization who's rooted in those standards to, again, share with the community all the things that the school is doing exceptionally well. And I can tell you that in the Danbury High School report, there's going to be a long list of those things that are done exceptionally well. That's nice to get a pat on the back. I think what most schools really look to, most districts look to, is what are the recommendations? What are those things that the high school may be struggling with? What are those areas, whether it be resources or facilities issues, that the high school alone can't address? And so having an outside organization which accredits your schools, talking to the district and suggesting that these things need to be addressed is often much more powerful than the high school principal or the high school staff making these requests. So the hope is that what it does is, again, celebrates all the things that we do well, and then gives each school a roadmap for what needs to be addressed in order to fully realize the set standards.
So let me put this in the context of the CJEF case is a case, are you familiar with it? It's an equity and access case that was decided, and Danbury, along with a number of towns, were party to the lawsuit. And that lawsuit was lodged against the state of Connecticut. And its purpose was to permit particularly urban areas to have access to adequate resources. And the definition of adequacy was at the central core of the lawsuit. And in the end, when it was adjudicated, after about 12 or 13 years, it was decided, first of all, I think general knowledge that education is not, it's a state right. It's not a federal right. So each constitution throughout the United States defines what education is for their state. And that's what we were asking clarity on, and I was one of the witnesses in the case. And when it was all said and done in the end, the judge came with the ruling that ostensibly what that means, provide an adequate education, is that the state of Connecticut needs to make sure that there's heat, that there's safety in the schools, and they have access to materials. And that was the benchline. So one would question, the public thinks, what is the purpose of NEASC? What I want folks to understand is what we do academically and those outcomes and those things that are highly important for student achievement really is the purview and the focus of NEASC.
Right.
Not only about the facility and the resource, but what's going on in teaching and learning, particularly in a comprehensive high school as large as this. Are we meeting those 7 standards? And at what level are we meeting them at? So even though we're providing the heat and the safety and the rest, you're really looking at teaching and learning.
Right.
And then the element of which that happens in. So that report that you produce will give us kind of that lens as we do our budgeting. The other lens that's providing, we've been working very hard with the Nellie Mae Foundation, which is a foundation just awarded Danbury a sizable amount of money to work on what we call the portrait of a graduate. That is, what do we expect our graduates to look like, be able to, when they leave K-12, particularly at this high school. And Kevin is working on that as assistant superintendent. And I want to talk a little bit about how that may impact in the work that you're doing.
So, you might not be aware, so I'll catch you up, give you some context as well.
Actually, I'm aware of it in that it shows up in the report, but
Right.
because that was one of the accommodations is focused on. One of the areas that's commended in a number of areas is the focus on using the Nellie Mae resources to move forward in that direction. So that does it does work into the report.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Thanks for sharing that. And so, we started developing a strategic plan, Dr. Sal, as you know. The strategic plan focused on, was anchored by standards not very different from the NEASC standards. And so resource allocation was a big one for us, and none of them more important than other ones. But it was about adequate and equitable resources for our high school and all of the schools in the district. Staff development and professional development for, you had pointed out earlier, talking about school leadership. And so staff development for us was about finding ways to continue to support and develop our school leaders, as well as making sure our teacher staff development was purposeful and focused. Teaching and learning was a big one for us, as any school organization might be. And so teaching and learning focused on curriculum updates K-12. And of course there was a focus on the high school as well as part of that work. It was important for us when reworking the curriculum that it was representative of the new student body that was in front of Danbury. And so just to kind of operationalize that for this conversation, courses like English, we would revisit the materials that were shared with students so that students who are on the other side of this camera right now can see themselves in those materials. In areas like talent acquisition, a more focused approach on recruitment, and there was, of course, a big focus on school climate also as part of our work. And so there were a lot of consistencies in our work in the NEASC accreditation process. And so we are very interested in what the final report is going to look like, because it may further inform the action steps that we've identified. One of the action steps that we identified is along this process, because initially our strategic planning process was led by the Portrait of the Graduate work. We started there, and we landed on, and Dr. Sal, you might remember, we've landed on 6 characteristics as a result of engaging stakeholders in our Danbury community. We initially, Dan and his school handed off the Portrait of the Graduate characteristic that they had initially landed on at the school level. We had used those ideas and feedback and informed the greater Danbury feedback. As we move forward in this process and understanding the curriculum updates that we were looking to embed in our work, the high school and other school levels started to push back and say, well, wait a minute, if these are the characteristics, how are we assessing these Portrait of the Graduate characteristics? What does this mean for student experiences in our school district? And frankly, we didn't have answers for it. And so at the same time, while we are trying to determine what our next steps are, because we have these 6 characteristics just kind of sitting there, and really as a framework for how we're going to move forward in the work, there was a new grant available for us to apply for through the Bar Foundation. And that grant allowed us specifically to focus on developing a Danbury portrait of the graduate. One of the conditions of the grant, of course, was to not necessarily lose all of the portrait of the graduate work, but they really did want us to start from scratch. And their feelings was that industry has changed in the last 2-3 years, never mind 5 years when the original portrait was developed. And so given those conditions and given the sizable award of the grant and an opportunity to get this right, we applied for the grant, we were awarded the grant. Like I said, initially it was tucked away in one of our action steps, Dr. Sal, under teaching and learning. So we were awarded the grant. I don't even think it's been a month. We went to initial convening in Massachusetts with a team here from the high school. So we have 2 teachers, administrators on that team. The steering committee has been built out to also include elementary and middle school representation. And so I'm mentioning all of this, number one, to provide some context for you, and then of course the community. But 2, the grant is requiring us to have a Danbury portrait of the graduate in front of the board by December 2020. Backtracking from that, it's going to require us, the steering committee, to develop a coalition. The coalition will be made up of Danbury stakeholders from industry, nonprofit, parents, students, teachers, etc. And we will probably have a number of activities in all of our schools to determine what does a graduate look like when they leave the 5th grade in K-5? What does a graduate look like when they leave 6-8? And all leading up to what a Danbury graduate looks like when they leave our district and, of course, Danbury High School. So we are excited about the work ahead. We initially developed those 6 characteristics, but we didn't have the answers for our school community, what that meant for informing curriculum, what that meant informing the assessment. Now we feel like we've partnered with the right people to help make this work. And so we're excited about the work ahead and the direction of the district.
So I see a yin and a yang here, right? The study here is going to inform some of that practice. We'll have it in time. When you mentioned the commission will be meeting this spring, they'll make a recommendation, and before the end of the school year, Mr. Donovan will have the report, the final report, with what are the categories of possibilities?
In terms of the accreditation?
Yeah, I think tell the audience,
Well,
it's not automatic.
It's not automatic. I mean, right now, Danbury High School is fully accredited. And I don't think I'm giving anything away by telling you that you will remain fully accredited. I mean, one of the categories would be recommendation for loss of accreditation, and that's certainly not going to happen.
Dan is doing a dance in the seat.
Pretty much.
So really, the categories to look at then would be either full accreditation or accreditation with a warning in one or more standards. And typically, if a district is placed on a warning for a standard, it doesn't mean that the district's threatened with losing accreditation. This is not an uncommon outcome. But what it means is that there are some things that the district and the school needs to address at a faster pace than maybe the 5 years that you typically get to finish things up. So I would suggest it's either going to be a fully accredited or fully accredited with warning in one or more standards. That would just be those areas that the school would need to focus on, work with those.
So as a superintendent, I sit back, we have a K-12 building district. Actually, it's pre-K-12. And then we have roughly 12,000 students. So, as we develop, one of the drivers of the work are the resources. And I would rather suspect that that'll be an area that we're going to have to focus on.
Sure.
Right? There's no question. Because we're challenged for a lot of ways. And for me, we have to weigh in terms of, the equity distribution of resources. And yet, the way a district is seen and the way a district is categorized is by its graduates.
Yep.
What happens in high school? So these recommendations are pretty serious and need to be addressed. And there's where, in terms of the board and myself, it's good to have the gestalt, the whole background, so that we can understand, we're going to have to, skew the resources somewhat to meet these standards, because they are best practice.
Right.
And what Kevin's saying, the particular work that I like about the Portrait of Graduate, it's not just about the 12th graders. It's what are we going to do at the elementary school and the first grade to look at these characteristics and develop that senior when they get there. What are we going to do when they're in middle school? So, the money that we're putting towards this will culminate and be given at the high school, but the curriculum revision and support will be K-12.
Right.
So that's sort of the way I see it systemically. So it not only provides the high school with a plan, provides us with a plan to do that. So it's much appreciated by me to do that. So Dan gets the report, then that report gets operationalized. Is it made available to the public, Dan? And how does that play out?
Yeah, as soon as I receive the report, obviously before it goes out public, we would have a discussion with central office and probably present to the board at some point, depending on when it comes in over the summer and stuff like that. But if not, by the end of June, early September, or August, or late August, we would go in front of the board and break down. I mean, it's a report. It's a comprehensive document where we'll just go down and pick the accommodations and recommendations so the board understands what happened.
And actually, I think the time frame probably a little quicker than that. I would hope that I'll have the final draft back from the from NEASC within a week or two, and then it'll take another probably 2 weeks for Dan and I to have to look at it and sit down together. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to give the final report to Dan. I'm going to say sometime by mid-March, sometime in that area. So you'll have the report. It's the actual final letter from NEASC that you won't get until probably late spring, summer with the.
Well, I attended your exit interview and I picked up on some of that. And Dan knows we've made some modifications to the current budget in anticipation of some of that regarding some resource allocation, some staffing level increases. So at least we have a start on that. Because that, our budget is submitted to the town for Valentine's Day. It's a great day for them. Not the massive day, but in getting this, the town has been pretty proud of our high school.
Yeah.
I hear nothing but good things about the faculty. I think from the report, I think the powerfulness and specialness of this high school with the administrators and teachers is one of the strong points.
Absolutely.
And that's recognized in the community, and we promote that. So I appreciate you coming.
Sure. If I could just say one more thing, because I don't get the opportunity. I usually just send the report in. I don't get this opportunity to talk in. Obviously, the report's not finalized, so I can't report out on the report yet. But I can say, in following up on what you just mentioned, Sal, that I've been sharing visits for almost 30 years now, and I have to say without question, and I hope there aren't too many viewers from other districts seeing this, because
we'll make sure there are.
I would say that Danbury High School and Danbury School District in whole is probably the best run district, best run school that I've had the pleasure to view. Dan and Dr. Martins are doing an extraordinary job of purposeful leadership, and I see that at all levels. The central office, I see it at high school. The quality of instruction, and it's not just the quality of your teachers, they're great teachers, but the fact that they're so thoughtful. And it's not just that they're thoughtful in and of themselves, they're in a constant communication that's facilitated by Dan and Dr. Martins in terms of assessment practices, in terms of differentiation practices for each student. The team as a whole could not have been more impressed with the level of instruction, level of learning, and the climate. You have the largest high school in the state, probably have the most diverse high school in the state, and you probably have one of the most positive school climates. And one of the more well-run schools that I've ever had the pleasure of being in. So that's a really remarkable thing. Obviously we can talk about the resource issues, but we'll save that for the report. But it's always nice to be able to share with not only the educators, but the community as a whole, what a gem they have within the community when you see a high school that's as well run and students that are as invested as they are in school. So that was really a pleasure.
One thing I've learned as a host is when to keep quiet. Couldn't say it any better than that. So thank you for viewing in. We'll look forward to getting the report out, and we'll be communicating that with the public. Thank you.